Okay, so in this session, I'm going to go over tile maps in 2D. So a tile map is basically a way for you to put tiles on your screen, and it's great for building levels. So whereas in the last tutorial, as you can see here, I just stuck some random sprites in the scene and added colliders to those, there's much nicer ways to add kind of parts of your level in Unity. Just kind of to start off with, if you use the 2D preset when you're making your project, then you should already have everything set up to use tile maps. But if you did not, then you might have to go to the package manager, and you might have to add the 2D sprite and 2D tilemap editor packages. It might be a good idea to just check if you have those. So just to go over that again, window, package manager. There's a drop down here that tells you everything that's in your project, and another option to just show every single package that Unity offers. If it's not in your list in your in project list, then just click Unity registry. It will show every single possible package and then find it in the list. And there's a little, that would be an install button. Currently it says move because I have it installed already. So that's 2D Sprite and 2D Tilemap Editor, and I'm on low battery already, so I'm going to find break all my positions while I'm at it. Fantastic, that should run a bit smoother now. There we go. Okay, so a tile map typically is a 2D texture that just has an array of tiles drawn on it. So there's several places on the internet you can find tile sets ready to go, and again, like last time, one of my favorite sites is kenny.nl. Kenny's a person who makes thousands of free assets for you to use in your games. They're CC0, which means you don't need to don't mean you need to credit him, even you can use them in commercial products or free ones, and that's fine. So I'm going to go to assets, and I'm just going to have a little bit of a look around. I think I went 2D. I found a nice one earlier with testing, and I think it was this one, the pixel platformer. So I'm just going to click on this one here, and I'll download that. Should give you a zip file. So I'm just going to go find that. What was it called? Wow. My downloads is a mess. Should really sort this out at some point. So once you've unzipped the file, it will have a bunch of stuff. So this comes with some backgrounds, characters, and stuff as well. But I'm going to go into Tilemap, and I'm going to copy one of these little textures here. So if I just open one up, you'll see that it's just basically every single tile that you might want in your game, kind of all together in one asset. And we are going to use this and slice it up into tiles and then add those to our game. So I'm just going to copy this one, the tiles underscore packed. And then I'm going to find my assets folder for the project. So I think I called this, what did I call it? I called it Industry tutorial session, assets, and I'm going to stick that in the sprites folder. I'll give people a second to catch up because I did a lot of that. So yeah, Kenny, download this one, and then just find the zip folder, open the Tilemap folder, and then just copy that over. And then if we go back into Unity, I should see this texture down here, or the sprite that I just downloaded. So if you click on it and then look in the inspector window, you'll see a bunch of options appear, and there's a lot here, so I'll go through them all. Again, if you're using the 2D preset for your project, then it will say Sprite, 2D, and UI by default. If you didn't, it will say default. So just make sure that Sprite, 2D, and UI is selected on the texture type dropdown. And then we'll get to Sprite Mode, which by default is single. And single is basically if you have a single sprite in this texture. Like the spaceship that I drew, this was single because I only had one image in it. That's the only one I wanted to use. And then I ended up spitting out one sprite I could drag in the scene. For this one, I want this to be multiple because I'm going to slice this up into several little smaller sprites. So Sprite Mode needs to be multiple. And then we get to the pixels per unit. The way I described this before is if I zoom in a bit. In Unity, 1 unit is one of these little squares, which is about a meter. And this is the number of pixels on the sprite that corresponds to 1 Unity unit. So this is going to depend on which kind of tile set you downloaded. You'll often want this to just be like a one-to-one mapping. So if you drew all your tiles to be 16 pixels, then you'll want this value to be 16. I did download this one earlier and found out it was weird. It was 18 pixels per unit. So that's the value we're going to put in here. Probably most tile sets either you draw or download will have them in some kind of power of 2. So it'll either be like 8, 16, 32, 64. This one's a bit weird, it's 18. But we can work around that. So this will mean 18 pixels on the sprite sheet will correspond to 18, or to correspond to 1 Unity unit on the screen. So once we've done all that, we go to the sprite editor, and I'll ask you to apply your changes. Just click apply, and I'll bring this window up, which shows us our tile map. Currently, it is just one sprite, but we want this to be sliced kind of into several sprites. And there's a few ways to do this. So if you go to the slice little option at the top, there's a little drop down. It gives you a bunch of options to control how to slice this texture up. And automatic, I don't know what automatic actually does. I think automatic bases it on padding around the object. So if you have transparency around all your little bits of the sprite, automatic is just going to find those and kind of wrap around the actual bits of the tile map that have opaque pixels. But that hasn't worked for us because it thinks that this big section here is one sprite, and then it's given us all these individual numbers as other sprites. So automatic isn't what we want. We can go by grid by cell size or grid by cell count. Now, grid by cell size is great if you know how many pixels each tile takes up. So for us, it was 18 by 18. And you can keep all the other settings the same and just click slice, and it's going to give us exactly what we wanted. So every single little tile is individual now. Ooh, I just moved that one. And then another alternative way of doing it is the grid by cell count. So if you know how many tiles are across and down on your texture, you can specify how many columns and how many rows there are. And I also did this earlier. I think it was 20 by 9. So if I go slice, it will do exactly the same thing, gives us the same tile map out. So once we've done that, we can click apply. And it is going to generate a bunch of tiles for us. So if I expand this, every single individual little tile on here is kind of like an object contained within this kind of drop down. Any questions so far about just importing the tile set? No, good. We can close that window then. I think for the next stage, I will probably add a new scene, and then we can go from there. So I'm going to create, so right click, create scene, and I'm just going to call this Tilemap scene, and then we'll just have everything from this session in its own scene. And then double click that, I want me to save that one, and then it's just going to give us the default scene. So now we want to do something with this this kind of collection of little sprites that we have here. And the way that we do that is, if I just open my note. So we need to create a Tilemap object, and that's going to put something in our scene that's going to let us kind of add the tiles. So if we go to game object, 2D object, and you should see a Tilemap option, and then rectangular. So we're going to select rectangular, but just to briefly go over, there are different kinds of shapes of Tilemap that you can add. So kind of the one that we've got is rectangular just because each of our tiles is a rectangle, obviously. But if I go back there, then we can also make hexagonal or isometric tile sets. They might be useful for the kind of games you want to make, but we want rectangular. And once I click that, a bunch of stuff has just happened. So you'll see that it's added kind of a grid to the entire scene view. And this is basically where we're going to add our tiles. So this is kind of like a canvas where we're going to be able to paint tiles onto it. It's also added a grid object, which is actually this grid, and a tile map as a child object of that. And it's just called Tilemap for now. So what it's actually created here, and what it's like asking me to rename here because it's highlighted it, is a tile map layer. So tile maps let you you have layers. So if you wanted some parts of the tile map to appear in front of other parts of the tile map, or if you wanted to add collisions to certain layers of the tile map, this makes it a lot easier to do that. So I'm just gonna call this, I don't know, base layer, be whatever you want. And I'm going to draw some sort of foreground elements in this layer. Later on, we'll add a background layer, and then we'll do stuff with that. So we've got a base layer, great. How do we actually add tiles to the scene now? This is one of the things where Unity makes it a little bit annoying than they probably could do, because there's a lot of steps involved here, but if you just bear with me, then we'll get through this. So we've got the tile map. We have a tile map renderer component, which is actually going to be rendering the tiles, obviously. But we need to create some tiles to add to the tile map. So first thing I'm going to do is down here, this little kind of button has appeared which says Open Tile Palette. I'm going to click that, and that's meant to open a little window here. This is the tile palette. So just like if you were painting on a canvas, you would have a palette of colors that you would paint. Similar thing here, we're going to have a palette of tiles that we'll be able to paint onto the tile map. Now, to start off with, we don't actually have a palette created. But there's a couple ways to do this. I think you can just drag this on. No, I think I need to create a palette first. If I create. So there's this little create new palette option here. And I think this is going to ask me to select somewhere to put the palette. So here we are. It's created this little thing here, and it's called new palette. And that's great. I think I'll just rename this and call it something like base palette. It doesn't really matter that much. And now you'll see that I have this base palette selected. Now I'm able to drag textures on here. Alternatively, if you don't want to use this drop down to create this palette, then you can right click here, go to create 2D tile palette, and then again rectangular. So that's just a couple places to do the same thing. So I've got my base palette selected. I'm going to drag this tile map that we added. I'm going to drag that on here. And it's going to ask me to kind of specify a folder to generate some tile objects into. Now it's going to generate a lot of these, so I'm going to create a new folder to put these in. And it's saving these inside the sprites folder, so this is the sprites folder, and I'm going to create a new folder inside that folder. I'm going to call this tiles, and then select folder. And what it's going to do here is for every single one of the tiny little sprites that we'd sliced from the main sprite sheet, it's going to pick every single one of them, and it's going to create a special tile object. So there's a lot of them. So inside the tiles folder, there's now a lot of these little kind of objects, and this is just Unity's way of kind of telling us that this is a special tile that we want to put on a tile map. As I say, Unity adds a lot of steps that are kind of weird, but That's just how Unity does stuff. So now we have all the tiles that we can now put on the tile map. So I'm going to make sure I have the base layer selected. It's going to bring the grid back up. And we still have this tile palette, this little window. You might find it easiest to dock this somewhere, so I'm actually going to dock the window underneath the inspector like this. That's one of the most powerful things about Unity that I don't think I mentioned before, is that you can kind of drag these little windows around and put them anywhere you want. So you can either have them floating, or you can dock them inside different parts of the window just by kind of like, if I drag the name of it and drag it kind of underneath the inspector window like this, then it just docks it kind of vertically inside this little area. And now I have my little selection of tiles here. So I'm going to start putting tiles into the scene. Any questions so far? Anything not clear about? Yes?
I missed the bit where you put the tile package on the palette.
Okay, so the part where I put the flex on. That's fine, as long as you have any of them selected. So I think you've got the new palette selected. Right? Yeah, that's fine. So I don't know if you want to select it. Yeah. And then have that tiles folder. Just because it's going to generate all the different objects, and if you stick them all in this folder, then it just gets flooded. So I just separate them. And maybe it will work at this point.
What did you do?
I moved the tile palette window underneath the inspector, so it does it for you. Cool, awesome. So hopefully everyone's caught up, and we have this tile palette that's ready to go. Inside the tile palette window, we have a bunch of controls here. So one of them is just kind of, I think this is just select. So this lets you select an area of the grid. That'll be useful if you want to select a bunch of tiles and either move them or delete them, but we don't have any tiles yet, so that's kind of useless. This one, this is the move tool. So if I had these selected, then I can move them. But again, there's no tiles here yet, so it's not doing anything. The one that we're going to start with here is the little paintbrush tool, which is the paint brush. And this is going to let us draw tiles on our tile map. So the way this works, you select the paintbrush, and then you select any of the tiles down here, and then you just left click and drag, and it will let you just paint some tiles. If I select a different tile, it will overwrite the tile that's already there. That's all good. One of the other features of this is that you can multi-select tiles here, so I can select this entire range of tiles just by left-click dragging and kind of selecting more than one tile. And that will let me just paste them all in a chunk. So now if I do this, I have a bunch of tiles just in the middle there. And it's going to let me paste them all as a group. That's all good stuff. Also, some of the tiles here have transparency, so if I were to kind of if I were to overwrite one of the tiles in the middle, then it has transparency. And this is one of the cases where the layers become helpful. So I mentioned before we can have possibly more than one layer. What we're going to see later is that, say if we had a snowman on top of this little snowy area here, then if we have tiles in the layer behind it, then it's just going to work the way you expect it to. It's just going to draw it over the top. That's all good. That's the kind of very basics about adding tiles. And this one, paint a fill brush. So I think this one is similar, except, so this control here, which is kind of like paint in a box. So if I select this one, and I select any tile here, if I click and drag, then it's just going to select a really big square and fill it with the tile I had selected. So that's next to the paintbrush tool. That's just to the right of it. I think if I select more than one, I don't know how this will work. Okay, that works how I thought it would. If you multi-select a big block, and then click and drag the same way, it's going to kind of fill in the area with all of the tiles that you had selected from the tile palette. That's all very useful. Yeah. Standard kind of controls you have here. You have the picker. So if I select this and then select another tile, it's going to select it from my palette and then let me draw with it. The erase tool, exactly how you'd expect it, just erases tiles. And fill tool. So if I were to get just kind of a box here of, that is the most uneven box I've ever drawn, and then select the flood fill tool, it's going to select every single tile that's in there that's bounded by the tiles around it and just fill them in. Any questions about the kind of default drawing tools? Nope. Good. Just to revisit the kind of the select and the grab tool, so I can select all these tiles here and then use the grab tool and it'll just move them all. So this is kind of a mess so far. I think also if I were to select a bunch, that one, I think I've hit the delete key. No, okay, that doesn't delete them. Cool. I thought that would. There's an eraser, yeah. It's okay. Do you know if there's an eraser in a block, or is that not a thing?
I do not know, right?
Okay, that's fine. You might need to erase them all individually, which is kind of annoying, but so I don't think if you select them all. Oh, that one.
Oh no, there is a way.
Yeah?
Click on a tile that's blank, that doesn't have anything on it.
Yep.
In the palette.
Oh, yes.
And then just drop those.
Oh, yeah. No, that makes lots of sense, doesn't it? Yeah, if you select a blank tile in the palette and then go over all of the ones that you... Okay, maybe that doesn't work. Cool, I thought that did. Maybe you have to erase them all manually. That's kind of annoying, isn't it?
I like to bring up the point again that Unity 2D is bad.
I prefer to say that Unity 2D is unrefined. Yeah, Unity, they added the toolset, I think, 9 years after the engine was first created, so they're a bit late to the party with 2D. It's kind of all stapled on to the end of all the 3D stuff they had, so it's a little bit hit and miss. It was for most use cases, but as we saw here, there was a lot of steps to it that Tilemap actually added. Once you got it added, it's quite powerful. Okay, so we have this random collection of tiles just placed randomly in our scene, and it looks disgusting, but we're going to run with that. If we were to kind of add a character to the scene currently, then they're just going to click through all of the tiles if they have physics. So if you just imagine this is like a side-scrolling platformer, then they're just going to fall right through all these blocks, and that's not very good. So we are going to add a collider to all these objects, similar to what we saw before in the last session, when we just added colliders to our floors, and then the characters didn't click through them. And the way we do that is if I select the layer, the entire layer, and go to Add Component, and it's called a Tilemap Collider 2D. If you add that, then what you should see is every object kind of inside the, every individual tile should have a little green box around it, including the little snowman, which is kind of sort of wrapping around it. And that's just added collision. So I won't bother adding a character to see how that works, because you know how collisions work now. Yeah, that's collision. I think there's kind of a bunch of options here which are similar to the options you had on other Tilemap colliders. So at the is trigger, which if you wanted an entire Tilemap to act as a trigger, then you can do that. And then we can also add effectors and that kind of stuff. Any questions about collisions on tile sets? Unity makes this actually pretty easy. I know I've worked with other tools in the past where kind of timemaps are a little bit more annoying with collisions, so that's one of the things that Unity is mercifully quite okay with. Cool. Now that we have a tile layer that has collision, what about if we wanted to have a background here? Because currently we've just got this kind of this scene, and this is going to be what the character walks on, but obviously you'll also have tiles in the background. That's very easy to do. So on the grid, I'm going to right click the grid, and I'm going to go to 2D object, tile map, and I'm going to add a rectangular tile map. Similar to how we did before, except it already has the grid, so it's not going to create another one. And this is another tile map layer. So I'm going to call this background layer, and this is going to let us add objects to the background. I think that Unity renders them from the top to the bottom, so I'm going to put that above base layer just by dragging it up. So it's still a child of the grid, but it's at the top now. I noticed this tile set doesn't actually have any background tiles. We're going to have a look on the Kenny's site again and see if they have any nice ones, actually. Bear with me for a second. Hopefully we can find something nice, and if not, then we'll just pretend that all the foreground elements are another background. None of these are screaming out background to me, so we'll deal with that. I'm going to pretend that these ice textures are a sky, and if you wanted this to look better, then find a different tile map, I guess, a different sprite sheet. So I'm going to just select some of these, and if I start drawing, okay, it renders them that way. Cool. I'm going to undo that. Do I have...
There is a really nice solution to this.
Yeah?
Just put the Z further back and on it.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. You know what, I'm going to... Yeah, it's easier, isn't it? I was wondering if it's okay. Is it an ordering problem, or is it something I'm doing wrong with the tile map? That seems to be...
Wait, I have a feeling I know what might be going on here.
Yeah.
If you draw on the background layer...
Yep, background layer is selected.
If you then turn the background layer off...
Okay. Yeah, okay, it's drawing it on top. Is there kind of a... That's very weird. I thought it just worked on the ordering there. I might have misremembered something. Yeah, that's true. If I give this -1. Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Okay, yeah, so it's using the sorting layer system rather than the Z. I get that 0 again, so put that back to 0. Yes, good. Every single tilemap layer has this order in layer option here, which is going to dictate kind of where it's drawn within a sorting layer. So the sorting layers are Unity's system for determining what's drawn in front of other things. I kind of skipped over sorting layers before, but this might actually be a good kind of place to talk about them. In fact, rather than using order in layer, if you go to the background layer and then use the sorting layer dropdown, we're going to add a sorting layer. So in the little sorting layers dropdown, there's this little plus arrow. So I'm going to make a new sorting layer, and I'm going to call it background. And the way that sorting layers work is it's something that's unique to sprites and like UI elements and basically anything in Unity 2D. If I have something on a sorting layer, such as the background sorting layer, if I kind of move this little layer kind of above the default one, then everything in the background layer is going to be rendered in front of everything on the default layer. If they have, I think it's if they have the same Z-axis. Well, actually, does it ignore Z? It might ignore Z. Yeah, I think it ignores Z. So everything in the background layer gets kind of rendered as you would expect, and then everything in the default layer is drawn over it. So if I make sure the background is on the top here, because things in the sorting layers kind of tab gets drawn from the top to the bottom. So I could also add others. I could call this foreground. And I might have something called effects. I don't know. You might have any number of layers here. I'm going to go back to my background layer on the tile map, and I'm going to go to sorting layer and give it the background layer. And now the order in layer shouldn't actually matter because it should just render it behind everything in the base layer.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Could you try moving the background layer left and right?
Yep. So physically.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Now I want to try something out.
Yep.
I mean, not here.
Oh, not here. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant like right now. Like you mean okay, like on your own.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Cool. Fantastic. Yeah. If I were to change the sorting layer to like foreground or effects, because that's in front of default, then it's gonna get drawn in front. Cool. So I'm just gonna do my cheeky trick here, where I just select this, and then just gonna go whoop. Now if I go in the game view, this is obviously the preview of what the camera's going to see. So the camera's seeing this little bounding box. The game view should show what I expect. So obviously this background is not something you would use in a game, but yeah, I really like Kenny's assets. They're good.
Oh no, I just meant what you draw.
Level design is my passion. Yeah, so like I mentioned before, because this snowman is in the kind of the base layer and the background layer is behind it, then it's going to blend as you would expect. I don't actually have that much really to say about Tilemaps apart from that. I didn't know how long this session would take. That's kind of been quick.
Did you do with your collision? Did you do the whole colliders?
No.
Or did you do individual tiles?
So it's individual tiles. So I think there is a way to do that, and I forget.
Wait, so what did you do? So did you just add a Tilemap collider?
There's just a Tilemap collider, yeah.
If you open up the palette in the
So here. Yeah? So just here?
No, so at the bottom.
Ooh, yes. This one.
No, you want the one that has the unique tiles in.
These?
Okay. It might be that one.
Alright.
I don't think it's that one.
Yeah, although you actually have reminded me, this is kind of a relevant option, is for each of the individual tiles that we kind of exported in the tiles folder, you can modify whether it's going to use the entire grid or just the sprite. And that's relevant, because if we find the snowman, or anything that's kind of a weird shape, so is the snowman just called snowman, hopefully? I'm just gonna go with this because it looks like it's not full sized. Either I can use Sprite and it's gonna wrap around kind of tightly around the pixels of the sprite, or I can use Grid and it's going to kind of lock it to the entire 18 by 18 in our case pixels. Or you can go none and it's going to prevent it from having any collision. So I think if I were to select, huh? Yeah. Yeah, so if I wanted to like deactivate collisions for all of these grass tiles, then I can just go none, and it should. Yeah, all of these don't have collision now, so that's how you do that. I'm gonna reactivate that. I'm just gonna go sprite. As for combining them all into one collider, is that a composite collider or is that a different thing? I think composite collider you use to add like.
Well, right now it is a combined collider.
Yeah.
There is a way to transform tiles into replicate objects.
Yeah.
But I can't remember how to do it.
Me neither. But I think that's basically the very basics of tile maps. That's most of what you need to just build a basic level. Because the collisions will work like that. They might be a little bit janky when you get to the edges, the kind of the intersection points. I don't know if they work the way you intend them to, but I think.
Do you want to do some Tilemap coding, because that is weird.
Yeah.
Very wacky.
Problem is, I don't remember how to do that.
Okay. Well, I don't know either. So.
No, I'm happy with that just being a short session. If people want to go on to Tilemap scripting, then I can go and remember how to do that and do that some other time. So I think you're talking about like there's ways to add basically unique functionality to individual tiles. So say if I wanted every single of this kind of tile to do something special, I can make it do that.
Oh, that's not what I was talking about.
Oh, you're talking about.
I was talking about like actually accessing a tile.
Oh right, okay,
Yes,
okay.
like just
All right.
basic like swapping a tile out for a different tile.
Right, gotcha. I'm happy keeping this session short and coming back to that later if people want.
Sure.
We have a session that doesn't involve any scripting for once. That's fine. Or if you remember to do it, then I don't know if you want to give a session. It's up to you.
I have no idea.
Alright, cool. That's something we can come back to if people want. Any questions so far about any of these timeout stuff? Cool. Yeah, that was the basics to Tilemaps. They're great for just designing your levels. So if you combine that with the character controller we built in the last session, then you should be able to build a better level than we had last time, because we just had a few kind of flaws. That was bad. Cool. I guess I'll end the recording there then. Thank you.